I'll tell you one thing. I don't get into water deeper than a bathtub anymore. My reason? One unseasonably warm November night in 1999. I walked onto the scene, instantly becoming overwhelmed by the amount of people there, and the loud commotion of all the transpiring events. Dozens of sheriff's deputies were in small boats, spotlighting the water, dragging nets behind them. There must have been hundreds, if not thousands, of chickens frantically bobbing up and down in the water below the bridge. The squawking from the ill-fated birds was deafening, even several hundred yards away. I grabbed my gear bag and I headed over to a tent that was set up on a road before the bridge. I immediately noticed Special Agent Jenkins giving out orders to all the various other personnel there. "What the hell is all this?" I asked him while shaking hands, all the while still staring at the absolute circus of a crime scene. Jenkins laughed at my expression, but wasted no time getting straight to the point. "Rob, there's a truck down there somewhere, a semi-truck. The driver and a pedestrian went in the water 3 hours ago, and no one can find them. That's why we called you in." He rattled off while directing my attention towards the water. I guess after studying my face, he understood more details were warranted, and further elaborated. "Oh yeah, the chickens. It was a poultry truck. We think he swerved to miss the lady walking on the bridge, and both she and the truck went over the guardrail. We don't anticipate either one of them being alive, but I need you to retrieve the bodies for us. Sheriff divers have been in already, but they were freaked out by everything going on, and they couldn't find shit. You good to go?" I nodded and he immediately turned back around, continuing to walk with the other agents there. I was still transfixed by all the damn chickens flailing around. It was something that I had never seen before in my entire life. I watched as some of the deputies were in boats, even trying to scoop up chickens with dragnets. I thought for a minute, and I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, "Tell all the cops to get out of the water. It's dark and there's a lot going on. I don't want to surface and be clipped by a boat." Jenkins honored my request and the state investigators called the deputies back to shore. I walked away from the crowd and I donned my scuba gear. After a quick safety check, I walked into the lake from the nearest shoreline. I figured the easiest thing would be to retrieve the driver first, since I already had a good idea where the truck came to rest. I swam out to about the center of the bridge, pushing all those damn chickens away from me, and I descended down into the dark water. As I was going down, I could hear the commotion caused by the panicking birds on the surface. It was honestly a horrible distraction. I had to mentally drown out that terrible noise so that I could focus. Very quickly, I located the cab of the big rig. I peered into it from the windshield, and I saw the driver floating against the roof. I surfaced for a moment to get my bearings. Once up top, I shouted for them to kill the spotlights that were being pointed down from the bridge. With the dark water filtering and redirecting the light, they just made it more difficult to see at the bottom. I descended once again, this time holding my own light and a pry bar. As I was nearing the lake bottom and the truck, I felt the presence of something very large brush past me. It was large enough to cause a current of water in its wake. Now, I had fished that lake numerous times and I had even dived in it too. But whatever passed by me was quite a bit larger than anything I had ever seen here. I figured that all of the commotion had drawn out a lot of different fish, and it was probably a large school of bait fish. Regardless, I continued on, heading straight for the sunken truck. A quick jab with the pry bar and I was able to shatter the driver's side window. I retrieved the driver, who was damn near waterlogged by that time, and I pulled him up to the surface. A couple of deputies met me in their boat a few minutes later and they took the body to shore. I remained on the surface, treading water for a moment to catch my breath. It was almost completely dark, aside from the blue and red strobe lights striking the water from the bridge above. I scanned around, trying to figure out where the pedestrian may have entered the water. As I peered between all the bobbing birds, I heard a sound off to my immediate left. It sounded like a large stone had been dropped into the water. I continued to hear it a few other times all around me. I raised my light to see what was making the noise, and I watched as chickens were being snatched from the surface and pulled below one after another. It was happening so quickly, I had to stare intently to even catch a glimpse of it happening. Completely perplexed, I lowered my head below the waterline, but I couldn't see anything or where the chickens had went. Maybe they were swallowing the water and sinking, I thought. Whatever the case, I began to feel uneasy about the situation at that moment. "You good?" I heard Jenkins yell down at me. I gave him a thumbs up, still studying the water around me. "Go grab the girl and let's get the hell out of here," he yelled once more. I descended all the way down to the lake floor. Finding the woman wasn't going to be anywhere as easy as locating a big-ass truck. I pushed the out events of the surface out of my mind, fully concentrating on my search at the bottom. Large shadows were looming all around me, just outside of my light's reach. Each time, I would see something move by, and I would shine my light in that direction. And each time, I would see nothing but the murky, green lake water. I figured that it was my mind playing tricks on me, which is a common side effect of prolonged diving. As many dives as I had completed by that point, I was probably crazy anyways. I paddled along parallel to the bottom, scanning for a sign, anything that could potentially lead me to the body. With my light sweeping back and forth, I hoped to catch a glimmer of her clothing or jewelry in the pitch black. Finally, I came across a white shoe. It was very obvious that it had just recently settled on the sandy lake bed, since it didn't look ancient like the other trash down there. I continued further past the shoe, finding more signs that I was headed the right way. Upon ending at a slight drop-off, I stopped to peer down into the trench. Almost immediately, I caught a glimpse of the bloated body resting down below. It was wedged in between a couple of embedded rocks. I made my way over to her body. After several pulls on the body's arm, it became free and trying to float upwards. My light illuminated the woman's body, and I was mortified of what I had noticed. Both of her legs were completely gone below the knees. It didn't look like a cut, no. There was too much meat and tendons dangling in the current. It looked like she had been chewed on by something, bone and all. I was more than ready to get the hell out of the water at that point, so I didn't waste much time theorizing what had happened. With the limp body on my shoulder, I pushed off of the bottom, and I headed straight for the surface. An immense pressure built to my ears, and I realized that I was ascending much too quickly. About halfway to the surface, I began to catch small glimpses of the shadows moving around me. It looked as if they were circling me as I hurriedly continued my way to the top. Panic consumed me as I fought to shoulder the body, and the light dropped out of my hand. Pushing my legs as hard as humanly possible, I broke through the waterline. I screamed for the deputies to come out there and take the body. I stared down into the water, and I watched my flashlight twisting its way down to the bottom. Paranoia took control though, and I decided to start for the shore. My body ached from how hard I was swimming, but I was compelled to keep going. The sound was happening every few seconds. As I swam through the floating chickens, I actually caught a glimpse of them disappearing beneath the surface. A flap of their wings and then they were gone. I couldn't see anything immediately around me, but I was racing to the shoreline. I felt the rapid beating of my heart all the way in my throat. An engine cranked, throttled up, and I watched the boat begin towards me. I was inhaling water by that point. All of my training and years of protocol had been thrown out of the window. I slipped my arms out of the straps on the O2 tank and I let it fall to the bottom. Fuck it. The boat was maybe 50 yards away and I was racing to it, moving with the speed I never had before at that moment. Some of the birds were loosing a blood-curdling scream as something unseen viciously latched onto them, dragging them down into their watery graves. I felt them being pulled down all around me as I kicked harder. The water created a suction by whatever unseen monstrosity was attacking the birds. A few birds had been grabbed immediately behind me. A rush of water brushed my legs as something quickly swam, very obviously in pursuit of me. Still pushing through the water, the noise suddenly stopped. My eyes were locked onto the light of the boat and the shoreline behind it. With a desperate last push, I finally reached the side of the boat, and a deputy reached down for my hand. They switched the motor off and the boat gently rocked in the wake it had just made. Just as I was lifting the dead body up for him to take, I felt a searing pain in the leg that was still dangling below the surface. The unknown creature tried to swallow my foot after striking me. Violently, I shook my leg and I felt it hit a large, fleshy mass. As I fought to get my leg away, I felt the woman's body being pulled from underneath. After a struggle to hold on, it was forcefully snatched out of my hands. I turned to look and I saw only the ends of her hair in the water. In an instant, I couldn't see any part of her, as she was pulled down underwater with an astonishing speed. "What the hell is that?" shouted one of the deputies. As I was trying to pull myself into the small boat, something crashed into the bottom of it. The impact made me lose my grip and I sank back under the water. Once I resurfaced, there was a heavy splash on the opposite side. The small boat rocked even harder. With the water moving in heavier waves, it was difficult to keep my head above the surface. I could only hear for seconds at a time, before being pushed back below with each tip of the boat. There was screaming from the two guys in the boat. Even worse, screaming coming from the water. My head sank and it bobbed back up. More screaming. Even while under the surface, I could still hear a loud noise from above. I saw long streams of bubbles as bullets entered the water. Behind the bullet streams was a long dark shadow racing towards me from the other side of the boat. I reached up and I pulled as hard as I could, until I was able to throw myself on the side of the boat. As I lifted my wounded leg from the lake, something grazed right by it. The pop of the gunshots repeated even after I was in the boat. I shook the water from my eyes and I saw one of the deputies frantically firing his pistol into the lake. I stood up and I saw another man in the water being shaken violently by whatever was below the surface. He was desperately screaming out in pain and trying to fight off whatever had latched onto him. The other officer was firing into the water around the man. I watched in horror as the man eventually stopped fighting. His eyes rolled back in his head. A thin band of blood crept out of his mouth. Slowly the man was pulled beneath the waterline. I leaned over to the side and I watched as the body was taken below. Moments later, not even the sight of his outstretched hands could be seen from the surface. The gunshot ceased, and we all stared down at the lake. A small stream of bubbles surfaced from the dark depths. There was no sign of him, or anything else for that matter. Desperately, we scanned the surface with the spotlight searching for him, but there was nothing. My brain was astonished when it heard my voice volunteer to go down and find him. The other two deputies refused to let me go, directing my attention to the wounded leg. I looked down for the first time, finding a gash that ran the length of my calf, steadily pumping a stream of blood. It was as if the muscle had been clearly sliced open, and a small artery had been severed. My foot had a half ring of bloodied indentions on the top, where the creature's jaws had latched on it trying to swallow it. The mangled meat that I saw on my own body was enough to make me vomit. The three of us sat in the boat for a moment, trying to rationalize what had exactly happened. After radioing for a paramedic, the deputies started towards the shore. Both of the other men stared straight ahead, with a silent look of terror etched into their faces. As we slowly trolled past more of the doomed chickens, that chilling sound returned, coming from all around the boat. That one and only sound that will forever remain burned into the darkest depths of my unfortunate memory.